So today is February 13th. In 3 days, it will be February 16th, which a lot of people aren't familiar with that date. But that's Lithuanian Independence Day. And that it's actually a day that, you and I have a lot of, we invest, invest quite a bit in that date. I might not be as expressive as not like, I'm not trying to compare myself to anyone or anything like that, trying to say, oh, look at me, like I go all out or anything like that. But it's something that weighs heavily on my heart. It's something that I think is a huge, I think my Lithuanian background, our ethnic background, I should say, is a huge fiber of my being, so to speak. And the person that you're speaking with today in a lot of different ways, including a lot of the people that I'm interested in. But so how do you look at V16, as we like to say? V16 is Vasara Shisholic, Vasara is Lithuanian for February. How do you look at V16 going into 2022 with the way the world is today?
Ooh, well, there is definitely a lot of uncertainty. And I'm not a foreign policy expert, on like the whole world, especially with a lot of things that are happening in the whole geographical, area. There's a lot of saber rattling going on, so to speak. But I think that for Lithuania, I think that they have done very, very well for themselves, being such a small country and making such a name for themselves.
Right.
Like I've heard a lot of people, I mean, especially, like they have kind of garnered a reputation for themselves as a country that doesn't just talk the talk, but it walks the walk.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like they, for example, I mean, they've been talking a lot about Belarus and Ukraine for years. They've been one of the loudest voices in the room about the things that are going on in those two countries. They allowed it was, oh God, what was it exactly? But like an official Taiwanese government kind of like establishment in Lithuania. I think it was like a Chamber of Commerce or something very simple. And as a result, the Chinese government was like, screw you, Lithuania, like no one likes you. And they're like, whatever, we don't like you either.
Oh, I love I had no idea. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was a relatively recent thing, but it's like it's like this tiny country, and it makes me feel very proud too that's our background, because that's been my experience for us growing up as Lithuanian Americans. Our parents were very, very loud Lithuanian Americans that were organizing demonstrations for, banning the Soviet Union from the Olympics, from the LA Olympics, and then like taking trips to the White House to talk to President Bush, the senior, meeting with his cabinet and like that kind of thing. Like it was just like things that were, I mean, mostly before my time. So right. I don't really have too many memories of of like things like that, other than like just the constant conversation of like we have to like, almost as if like, especially with our community, like being part of the Lithuanian American community, when you're a part of a community that comes from not only just a tiny country to begin with, but then a tiny country that no longer technically exists on a map. It's like when you are a part of that exiled community, you have this feeling of like, we are this country now. We have so many responsibilities. We have to upkeep the language. We have to upkeep the culture. We have to, we have to have all of these, kids summer camps so that they have connection, and, send them to Saturday school so they have connection there, and all of these big things. And it's the pressure is a lot more off now that they've been free since 1990. But there's still some remnants of that, I think, especially with our particular upbringing, right? And so I guess, it fits the reputation that Lithuania has right now in the world. It kind of fits with my memory of our cultural upbringing within that community as like a almost almost like an expatriate community, even though we're all Americans, right?
Right.
Like we're born Americans. If you know, that's my citizenship. That's my passport is that 100%. But like kind of growing up, like sort of in this like weird bridge in between two worlds, it felt like.
Right.
But it's cool that like the reputation that the country itself has developed is very similar to our culture that we kind of grew up with, which is like, yeah, we're small, but we're going to be really loud and we're going to be pit bulls and we're going to tell people, you know, when we think that they're wrong and we think that they need to be doing the right thing.
Right. That's too. There's a lot I can pull from that. As in,
sorry,
like,
I was talking for a while.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You said a lot of really good things, a lot of really interesting things. And I think that one of the things that I, you know, obviously with me, with the decisions I made in my life, obviously going in the military to deploy into Iraq, you know, that's very much walking the walk in my own way. The decision to go to Ranger School was another one of those as well, where I just like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it all the way. And I was really, really proud to do all that stuff and accomplish all the things I did along the way, because again, I'm a value driven person, but I opened this conversation with, it's a huge fiber of my being a Lithuanian American, coming from having that huge ethnic background. Like, I don't just, I proudly put that little, you know, accent in my last name when I write it, and it's just like, and just it's because a lot of that stuff gets dropped off along the way, and I make sure my kids do it too, of course. But yeah, I guess another question I have, not to go too long on this, but are you worried that, you know, because you talk about how, like, you know, ever since 1990 happened, you know, things are kind of like, you know, dropping off or loosening up, so to speak. Do you feel like there are members of the Lithuanian American community, or I guess the Lithuanian community, however you want to phrase it, like living in the US, who tend to lose sight of what actually happened prior to 1990? Is that an area of concern of yours at all?
I mean, I think it's always possible, right? I mean, memory fades in any individual and in any community. But I think that it also is one of those that, like, I mean, I don't know if you remember the history classes that we had to go to at Saturday school, but it was like, I mean, we pretty much learned like the same history lessons, like pretty much every year, going down to like, all right, 1009 was the first year that there was a written record of Lithuania. And then, like, you know, and then all of these other things happened, you know, and then, like, you know, and then they were unified with Poland because we wanted to keep Russia at bay. And like, you know, and it was a disaster for Lithuania. You know, like, it's just like you have this whole long line of history, you know, going into, you know, having people that were sent to Siberia, and, you know, and, you know, like when people, they didn't really have much food at all. And yet you had people that were like making rosaries out of breadcrumbs, you know, with like the very meager portions that they had. Like, that at least was what we were being taught. And my assumption is that that's continuing. And the reason why I feel like I can assume that is because I have been to some of the summer scout camps, you know, as an adult, to kind of help lead things in the years since then. And not every summer, because obviously, like, living overseas makes things a little bit difficult.
Of course.
But like, you know, like we would have really fun night games where it's like, oh, we're being invaded and we need to like, here's your task, is like, you've got to find this one forest brother, he's out in the forest and he's got a special message and that's going to save Lithuania, you know.
For those
like,
confused,
they still play those.
Yeah, so when she says forest brother, they're referred to as the partisani, the partisans who fought against the Soviets during the basically during the Second World War, just trying to maybe not. I want to make sure I'm making a clear distinction. They were not fighting alongside with the Nazis or the Germans. They were fighting for themselves, against both of them, really. And
yes,
in one instance, when Germany was like, "Yep, Stalingrad's not going well. Here are some weapons, you know, so you can help defend yourself, whatever." And as they did their own little tactical retreat. and of course they took advantage of that. But at any rate, yeah, that it's there were no, it just, and I think that's just really,
These were guys that literally were like, a lot of times they were like farmers that would just go and like live in these little like underground huts in the winter time.
mhm,
And you know, like they just would like pick off
Red Army
Russian
soldiers.
soldiers
Mhm,
usually. I mean, because
mhm.
for the most part they were Soviet, right?
Yes.
And you know, there was a Nazi invasion at one point, but most of the history was against the Soviets. And so like they would just be, it was like it was guerrilla warfare essentially out in the forest. And so
No, it was not essentially.
and
It
it
was. It was. Yeah.
okay,
Go
yeah.
ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, fair,
Yeah.
fair.
I'm
So, but
lawyered. No, I'm kidding.
it's no, but it's viewed typically as like technically a failure because Lithuania was still invaded. It was still annexed. It was still like it became part of the Soviet Union. But one of the ways that people look at it now is that it also was in some ways a success because of the fact that in Lithuania there was a reputation for people that were supposed to be kind of sent there to sort of like colonize the area
Mhm.
that were like, screw that. I don't want to go to Lithuania. Like maybe Latvia, maybe Estonia. I don't want to go to Lithuania because I'm going to get shot by these crazy people in the forest.
Right.
So they weren't populated as much by people coming in from places like Russia. That's at least what I learned anyway. I don't,
Hmm.
you know, like maybe some historians on that, you know, can correct me, but that's at least what I learned was, you know, one of the successes of that whole endeavor, and at great personal costs. I mean, even just, you know, supporting these guys with food or information could get somebody tortured to death. We have someone in our family who was tortured to death for precisely that reason. And then, you know, buried in a shallow grave until her mom like bribed enough Soviet, you know, officers or whoever to find where she was buried so that she could bury her in the family plot. So like, so, you know, things like that happen. So anyway, but today, I guess I don't have enough data that would tell me that the current community is forgetting anything, because I've seen instances where they're still doing these like night game history lessons, right? Where they're like, all right, like don't get caught and don't get sent to Siberia, you know, like, you know, during this game, and you know, try to go and get the three colors of the Lithuanian flag. You know, you've got to go on these different missions to these different parts of the woods and come back, and
Right.
hopefully everybody stays safe. Like don't twist an ankle, but you know,
Right. Yeah.
but it's like there's still a lot of these things that are getting taught these days that I think that still gives me a lot of hope that they are still sort of learning a lot of the similar stuff that we learned as kids.